This is Yair, Davidiy speaking to you from the land of Israel. Today we are going to discuss certain highlights that we came across in our study of the book of Yeshua. Yeshua was the disciple of Moses. If you will remember, the Israelites came down into Egypt. They came down into Egypt from the land of Canaan in the time of Joseph, down to the land of Egypt, from the land of Canaan. They settled in the land of Egypt. They increased and multiplied in the land of Egypt. Then the Egyptians began to oppress them and to enslave them and to work them. And they came out of Egypt under Moses. Moses delivered them under the direction of God Almighty out of Egypt. They came out of Egypt. They wandered in the wilderness. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. In the wilderness they received the Torah. Then they approached the land of Canaan and they came in to conquer it. People of Israel sent 12 spies, one spy from each of the tribes to spy out the land and to come back and give them a report. And the spies went in and 10 of the spies came back with a bad report. 2 of the spies had a positive one. The 2 spies who had a positive one were Joshua from the tribe of Ephraim and Caleb from the tribe of Judah. They were the only ones who came back with a positive report. As a result of the bad report of the spies, the Israelite nation rebelled. They did not want to go into the land of Canaan and conquer it. They wanted to return to Egypt. God was angry with them and decreed that that generation should stay in the wilderness and die there, and only their children would enter the land, the promised land. But those 2 spies who had come back with a favorable report, Joshua from Ephraim and Caleb from Judah, would indeed inherit the land. So when they came to the borders of the Holy Land, of the Promised Land, which actually incidentally stretches from the Nile to the Euphrates River, but there was a special value in conquering the western side first of all before conquering the other portions. When they came to the edge of the land, Moses passed away and Joshua from the tribe of Ephraim followed him, succeeded him, and he became the leader of the Israelites in conquering the land. They took 7 years to conquer the land, to overwhelm the inhabitants, and another 7 years to divide the land up amongst the Israelite tribes, each tribe receiving its own tribal portion. The tribe of Manasseh received 2 portions, received 1 portion east of the Jordan and another portion west of the Jordan. In other words, they conquered the whole land of Canaan. The Israelites conquered the whole land of Canaan. They divided it up amongst them. Some of the Israelites received their portion west of the Jordan River. 2.5 tribes received a portion east of the Jordan River. The tribes that received a portion east of the Jordan River were the tribes of Gad, of Reuben, and the half tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh was divided into 2 sections. Half the tribe of Manasseh received a portion east of the Jordan. Another half received its portion west of the Jordan. At that time the Jordan was much wider, much larger than it is now. I once served in a military base when I was in the IDF, an outpost just beside the Jordan River, and I had quite a good time, quite a deal of leisure, one could say, to observe it, to look at it, and you can see that the bed of the Jordan River was immense. It was probably one of the largest, widest rivers in the world at that time because the climate was different. We know from the Bible, we also know from other evidence that at that time, in that period, the area was much more damper, wetter, there was more rain, there was forest in the area, and there was much more water than is now. And so it was quite a large, expensive body. The Jordan River was quite a large, expensive body. It's quite a large, big river. And it divided the 2 halves of Manasseh, one in the east and the other in the west. Even now, even though the Jordan River only looks like a small little stream, that is because most of its water is taken by Jordan and by Israel to irrigate fields for domestic reasons. They siphon off the bulk of the water, leaving only a small amount to continue its trickle down, just sufficient to not let it dry up altogether. At all events, we have these two halves of the tribe of Manasseh. We have these two halves of the tribe of Manasseh, one in the east and one in the west, and they are divided by an expanse of water. Later, when the Assyrians conquered the northern tribes of Israel and they took them into exile, they took part of them they took overseas in boats by using Phoenician and Philistine, that is Minoan proxies, agents who were in their part of their colonization process of their attempt to re-establish themselves over the seas in a more safer area. Another portion of the Israelites captives they took overland into areas of the Assyrian Empire. That was the bulk of the Israelite captives, the 10 tribes who were taken into exile. These 10 tribes, from the areas of the Assyrian Empire, they eventually moved. They became free. The Assyrian Empire broke up. They moved into what's now southern Russia. From there, they moved westward, overland into Europe. And we can identify them. We can identify these Israelite nations as they move around by their tribal names, by other factors, and we can find that even though they had been exiled and sometimes broken up into different pieces, more or less they remained together, and they retained the same name, the same tribal names they had, the same 12 names of the 12 tribes that they had, and also not only did they have each tribe had its own name, but we are told in the Bible that the clans, the sons and the grandsons of the original progenitors of the tribes, each gave rise to clans, to sub-tribes within the major tribe. And these names of these sub-tribes, they remained with them. And sometimes they became the names of nations, or smaller nations, or groups of nations. And we find them moving around, and we find them even the family arrangement that they had in the land of Israel with certain sub-tribes belonging to an overall major tribe. They even retained more or less similar frameworks in their movements. And their arrangements one to each other, they also retained to some degree. And we find we can follow them in their pathways of migration until they reach Western Europe. We find elements who we identified with Manasseh. We find them both in the region of Germany and France and the Netherlands, and we also find them in the British Isles. In other words, we find two halves of Manasseh, one on the continent, the other in the British Isles, and an expanse of water divides between them. Later on, America was discovered. Incidentally, the name America means Hamachiri. That is, America was, that is, first of all, Christopher Columbus discovered America. Then an Italian sailor, navigator named Americo Vespucci, he proved that the Americas were separate continents. They weren't part of Asia as was originally thought. And America was named after him. It was named America after Americo Vespucci. The name Americo Vespucci, and the name Americo was given to him because that name was popular in the region of northern Italy where he was born. And this was associated culturally with the area of southern France, where there had been a Jewish person of note, known as Hamachiri in Hebrew, Machia, or Hamachiri. Hamachiri meaning the people of Machia, is given a nickname given to this person. And this person had been a local noble, he'd been an important person, he'd been a powerful person, he'd been a friend of the kings, and so on. And even later legend tried to say he was a Christian saint, but only recently has it been proved that he was actually Jewish, and the local Jews wrote about him. And when his name Ha-Machir, or his nickname Ha-Machiri in Hebrew, was translated or transliterated, one could say, was rendered into Latin, which is the language they wrote in at the time, they wrote the Hebrew name Machir, or Ha-Machiri, as America. So the name America became part of the stock of names given to boys in that region. And from that area came Americo Vespucci, America Vespucci was in effect indirectly named after this Jewish person, who also in turn bore the same name as Machir, the firstborn son of Manasseh, whose name literally means the sons of Machir, and that is how the name America arose. So the Americans are named after Machir, the firstborn son of Manasseh. At all events, after America was discovered and the USA became an independent state in the 1700s and 1800s, millions of people from Germany picked themselves up, and also from other parts of Europe, and they moved to the USA. And they are a substantial portion of the population of the USA today. And we have shown how these people actually were not Germans, they were separate from the German people amongst whom they lived. They were a different type of person, and they had kept themselves apart from the others, more or less, or sociological, demographic reasons, objective reasons had kept them apart. And they'd remained separate at all events, and then they had moved to America. So now we no longer have elements from Machir to such a great degree on the continent, but we do have them in America. And we also have them in Britain, even though many from the British Isles also went to America, and many of them were from Manasseh. Quite a few from Manasseh areas remained in the British Isles. So we have a division of Manasseh poor, Manasseh over here, Manasseh in Britain, Manasseh in America, and water, the ocean, separating them. So this is a pattern which is interesting. So too we have amongst Machir, there was a subtribe, a large, very important subtribe known as Gilead, or Gilad in Hebrew. Gilead is very important, is mentioned in the Bible. Gideon, the judge, in the book of Judges, he came from Gilead. So did others. Gilead was a very important subsection of Manasseh, of Machir. Machir was the firstborn son of Manasseh. Gilead was one of his sons, but Gilead gave rise to a large number of other clans. Gilead, as we said, was important. Gilad, when they moved to the west, they also are known as the Davidiy, or in the Gaul, in what is now France, and later on as the Caledonians, and similar names in the British Isles. And we find them descendants of these Giladies both in Britain, especially Scotland, and also in Ireland, especially Northern Ireland. So we have a section of Gilead. And we find a similar arrangement had existed in biblical times, when the Gilead was together with his tribe of Manasseh and the subgroup of Machir in the land of Israel. He had a section east of the Jordan, a section west of the Jordan. So now we have a section of his descendants in Scotland and another section in Northern Ireland with an expanse of water dividing them. Another point we came up with is that the Israelites in the land of Israel, before they were exiled, they intermixed with the local peoples. They intermixed with them, they intermarried with them, and also throughout the history, to some degree, they intermarried with other peoples. Nevertheless, they retained something of their internal cohesion, of their national cohesion, and they moved, and they remained. A person is born whole. He's not just because his parent is from one area, his father's from one area, his mother from another area. It doesn't mean he's half and half. He's a whole person. A person is something, and of a whole entity existed within each person, and each person who's descended from Israel is a descendant of Israel. It doesn't really matter if his ancestors were intermixed or not. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 47, it describes the tribes in the end times when they return, at the end of the exile, when they return in the end times of Judah. There's the Jewish people, and the 10 tribes have reunited, and they divided the land between them. When they come to divide the land to give each person his tribal portion, also someone who is not a physical descendant of Israel, but has lived amongst Israelites, he will receive a portion together with a tribe that he has dwelt amongst. So this is something, this is a point worth noting. Another point worth noting is that according to biblical sources, you are as you agreed to be before you were born, as if to say. And you can take this as representing some type of psychological truth. In other words, this explanation, you don't have to take it literally, but you can take it as reflecting an inner reality. Or you can take it both as an inner reality and as something that literally occurred. It doesn't really matter. According to this account, before a soul comes down to heaven, before a soul comes down to earth, he is asked if he agrees to be born to parents in such and such a body and in such and such a situation, with certain attributes, good ones and bad ones, weaknesses, faults, talents, good qualities, everything mixed in together. And he is told that this, what he is given, is in order for him to perfect himself as he is. Does he agree to go ahead with the task given him? And the soul agrees, and then the soul comes down. In other words, whatever you are, whatever you were born with, you agree to it in advance. Apart from that, from a psychological point of view, what you have is most suited for you to develop your inner being, for you to realize your potentiality. You have been given it all. And even the faults that you have, if you know how to deal with them, how to overcome them, or how to utilize them in a positive direction, they are there for you as tools given unto you, as tools suited to your inner capabilities to develop as you should do so. So this is something also worth knowing, worth thinking about, and worth applying.